Daddy NoNo. Daddy NoNo. Daddy NoNo. Daddy NoNo. Daddy NoNo.
Oh, Daddy NoNo.
Oh god, my fans call me Daddy.
YugiNoNo.
King Prepare. Alright guys, real quick before we get started, be sure to follow my Facebook page. I try to upload videos every single day, but on the days that I don't, I usually explain why on my Facebook page. So if you want to keep up with what's going on with me or the channel, that is the best way to do it. But in today's video, we're going to be going over a question that I actually get asked a lot. And the question is, how good am I at Yu-Gi-Oh? And right now,
I suck.
And what I mean by that is I suck right now because I barely even play this format. Really, ever since Zoo came out, I've been barely keeping up with the meta or anything. And it's not necessarily just because of Zoo, but I really dislike Paleos.
Fuck Paleo.
And honestly, there's not really a meta deck right now that I feel like playing. Which is why I've been playing basically nothing but Cyber Dragons, because I really have fun playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I have really mastered Cyber Dragons. And you guys all know that it's one of my favorite decks, and I just have so much fun playing it. So I would say basically this entire year so far, I've really only been playing for fun. I mean, yeah, I've made Cyber Dragons pull off some really cool combos and things, but is it tier 1? No. And I do consider myself to be a pretty good and knowledgeable player. I read cards, I keep up with what my opponent's doing and everything else, and with whatever deck I'm playing, I practice every single combo and everything to make sure that I've completely mastered the deck. But practicing with your own deck and keeping up with the meta isn't everything. Every single format that I've topped a regionals with, I've actually studied every other deck in the format. Not just the meta, but even like the tier 2 decks that I could be running into. Blackwing! For example, when I was playing Monarchs, I not only mastered Monarchs, but I paid attention to Cosmo and Burning Abyss, as well as knowing my outs to Darklaw, and Heroes and everything else. It's really not enough to be knowledgeable and comfortable with the game, but you have to really, analyze everything else that everybody is playing, and also other card choices that people are playing. Perfect example, on the subject of Monarchs, if you're playing against Monarchs, you really want to have it out to Domain. I mean, if you want to summon from the extra deck. If you don't, then don't worry about it. But Cosmos, for example, don't really need their extra deck, so they didn't have as much of a problem with Domain, but they had a problem with Stormforth because Stormforth doesn't target. Or before that, when I was playing in Magician format. Wavering Eyes was like the card that defined that format. It really was. That card is broken. So you have to keep Wavering Eyes in mind, as well as like side deck cards, because that was also the most popular deck. I mean, everyone was playing Magicians at the time. But knowing that most people were playing Magicians, you have to really study the mirror match, and Magical Spring was broken in that mirror match, because they would activate Wisdom Eye, then you'd flip over your Magical Spring and basically auto win. I cannot tell you how many games I stole by siding Magical Spring. Which brings me to my next point. You have to really think about your card choices and play the most optimal cards you can by studying what other people are playing. Let's use Duelist Alliance format as an example. Shaddoll and Burning Abyss were two of the best decks out at the time, with Shaddoll, initially being the better deck, but Burning Abyss, obviously ended up being the better deck. Oh, those weren't good decks. Ice Barriers were so much better. But still, both of those decks are dark, and both of those decks use their graveyard, so if you weren't playing those decks and you were playing like Teller Knights, for example, you could side Shadow Imprisoning Mirror to completely shut off those decks. Or fast forward to Nekroz format, ignoring the Jin lock, which you should be playing your Jin outs, of course. But everyone was playing Nekroz, and that deck searched a lot. So Mistake was an excellent card against that deck, but if your deck searched a lot, you could play Droll and Lockbird. And Droll and Lockbird is debatably the better card here, especially because it is a hand trap. So what I'm pretty much getting at here is that you are as good at Yu-Gi-Oh! As you want to be, and as good as you try to be. I could be good? Like if you are still playing, anti-meta Teller Knight, that is completely fine, but if you're still playing Teller Knights aimed at decks that aren't even relevant anymore, then you're not gonna do very well. You can play any deck you want to, guys. If you pilot it well enough and you make the right card choices, you can still do well in events. Now, you probably won't do as well as if you mastered a tier 1 deck like Paleos, for example, but you can still top 32 at regionals, or even if you don't want to go to a regionals, you can still do very well in the locals. Now, without going into too much detail and running this video, way too long, I'm gonna help you guys out with some card choices for this format. The 3 best decks now are Zodiac, Infernoids, and Paleos. So let's just briefly talk about some really good cards against all 3 of those decks. So for pure Zodiac decks, board wipes are very good. I'm talking Raigeki and Dark Hole, and Dark Hole's at 2. And also, of course, Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. And if you draw your Kaiju, you can easily out there Trident. And if you're like me and playing Cyber Dragons, you can give your opponent the Jizukiru and go into Chimera Tech. But not every deck could be as cool as Cyber Dragons. And moving on to Paleozoics, the deck plays like 100 traps. So Royal Decree and Jinzo are both very good cards against that deck, as both those cards say that you cannot activate traps. But another card, if you wanted to play it, it will hurt your wallet a little bit more, but Dinko Sekka is also amazing against that deck. And against Infernoids, that deck needs to banish cards, so you can play Artifact Lancia, which is a fantastic hand trap. And of course, being an artifact, you can, play it with the Artifact engine, which is even more broken. Or of course, if you want to go full-on anti-meta, you can play Imperial Iron Wall, which says that no cards can be banished at all. And honestly, guys, the Kaijus are probably some of the best cards available to us right now. I mean, because Kaiju's out literally everything. Like, for example, if you're going against heroes and they have like a Dark Claw or a Toad out, you can easily get around those. So in Yu-Gi-Oh, card choices are very, very important. There's optimal cards and then there's non-optimal cards. Like, really good example here. So there's Kaijus, which are optimal, and then there's cards like Lava Golem, which aren't optimal in every single deck. And that is because when you use Lava Golem, you don't get to use your normal summon. So if you need your normal summon, that card's kind of bad. But if you're playing like a Pendulum deck like Metaphos, for example, and you don't really need your normal summon, then Lava Golem's a pretty good card. And another example of an optimal card versus a non-optimal card, I would say Lost Wind is a pretty good meta-relevant example. And I'm using Lost Wind as an example because Paleozoic's play it. So let's use Lost Wind, which negates a special summon monster's effect, which basically everything is special summon these days. And it also reduces attack and can reset itself from your graveyard. So this card gives you a lot more utility than a card like Fiendish Chain. Now, Fiendish Chain is also a very good card, and it was really, really good back in the day, but Fiendish Chain is not as optimal as Lost Wind. Not as good as Spellbinding Circle. And these are just kind of some more obvious card choices that are just always on the top of my head. But seriously, guys, don't be afraid to, find a card that works and works really well and use it. In other words, don't be afraid to innovate. Don't be afraid to play a card that you know is good just because other people don't play it. Like when Cloudblade was a deck, no one was playing Necro Valley. I mean, nobody. And then one night, me and Sam were all testing, before regionals, and we just, Sam just had this epiphany. It was like, hey, we should just all side Necro Valley. And in testing, it was really damn good. So yeah, guys, just to recap, practicing your deck isn't everything. You have to practice other people's decks, learn what other people are playing, and don't be afraid to net deck. That's a dirty word. Always scrubs net deck. I mean, if you don't want to net deck your own deck, that's fine, but still look at what other people are playing because, other people are going to be copying those decks. And by seeing what other people are playing, you know exactly what's a main deck or side deck. And practicing your deck over and over and over again is very important, but card choices are also very important. And lastly, play whatever cards you want. Yu-Gi-Oh is all about having fun. If you're not having fun, then
You have a fucking problem.
But anyways, guys, I hope this video helps you out and makes you better players. And as always, guys, be sure to dick slap that like button and subscribe.